Shin, an average high schooler, started playing the brand new VR MMORPG game called The Gate. This was the most advanced game of its time and took the world by storm. Players could explore the world as freely as they wanted, select their own race, and defeat powerful monsters together with their friends. This game was a dream come true for everyone. But one day, this popular game became a death trap as the servers were jammed and people got stuck inside with no way of leaving the game. When a monster killed someone, that player died in real life as well, which created a huge wave of panic. Shin was an experienced gamer who protected his fellow players from untimely death. His goal was to finish the game so they all could return back to their normal lives. After several months, he finally left his home and his support characters to enter the final dungeon and face the final boss. The monster lunged forward with an attack, but Shin dodged and backed off before rushing forward and delivering a wild slash, cutting one of the wings off. The boss simply regenerated his wings back alongside his HP. He realized that he needed to finish this fight as soon as possible. So he rushed forward and clashed against the enemy before jumping up and delivering hundreds of strikes in quick succession, almost defeating the monster. Before the monster could recover, he used his special ability to upgrade his sword and jumped up in the air, striking the monster straight on the head, finishing it off forever. As soon as the monster disappeared, the announcement was made inside the game about how the final boss had been defeated, which meant that the game was officially over and people were allowed to log off. He excitedly checked the log sheet to see that all of the players were slowly logging out and disappearing from the list. He made sure that every single player left before he decided to log out. Before he could do that, however, a sudden noise made him turn around and he noticed that a new gate had been opened behind him. The curiosity got the better of him and he decided to check where it led before logging out. Suddenly, there was a huge bright light and the next moment, when he opened his eyes, he found himself in the middle of nowhere in a grass field. All of this felt very realistic, but he checked his menu to realize he still must be in the game. He tried to log out but noticed that the logout button had disappeared once again. His heart sank as he immediately checked the number of players in this game, only to realize that none of the players from the previous game had been transported here and he was all alone. He cursed his luck, but realized that he needed to man up and figure this problem out first. He used his magic bird to take him to the location where his house used to be. To his utter surprise, the house that he built was still there. But suddenly, he noticed that a bunch of hoodlums seemed to be harassing a girl named Tiara Lucent. They asked the girl to tell them where the elf was, but when she refused to give them the information, they grabbed her and started taking her out into the forest. The moment she exited the barrier around the house, though, a massive monstrous pig appeared in front of them, scaring the hoodlums away while she collapsed on the ground, waiting for her death. Thankfully, Shin slayed the beast just as it was about to attack her and asked whether she was okay. She thanked him for saving her and took him inside, where she asked what he needed. Shin was confused as this was supposed to be his home, but according to the girl, this home belonged to an elf named Razar. He suddenly realized that Razar was none other than the pretty white-haired NPC character that he had in the last game. Apparently, she was very famous and owned this establishment. The girl introduced herself as Tiara Lucent and claimed that she could relay his message to Razar for a small fee of 1,000 silver coins. Shin was confused as in the last game, there were only gold coins, so he produced a gold coin, claiming that he only had this. But Tiara's jaw dropped to the floor as apparently the gold coin was worth 10 million silver coins in this world. She asked who he was and Shin replied that he belonged to the race of high humans. This shocked Tiara even more as high humans apparently went extinct 500 years ago. Shin realized that the high humans must have been the players from his world who all logged out of the game after he defeated the final boss, which meant that this world was 500 years in the future. He thanked her and handed her the gold coin for giving him this information. At first, Tiara got shocked and told him that she couldn't take it, but soon the gold digger inside her came out, and she accepted the coin and simply stared at it with disbelief. He asked her about the monstrous pig in this area, and she replied that she was cursed. According to her, she used to have silver hair just like any other elf. But one day when she was a child, she got cursed by someone and her hair became black. Ever since that day, monsters had been attracted to her and everyone hated her. Thankfully, Razor took her in and used a magical barrier to protect the house so that no monsters could attack them while inside. She claimed that she would live her entire life inside the house, which was a pretty sad thing. So Shin used his magic to check her stats and realized that it was just a low-level curse that randomly happens. He told her to relax and used a purifying magic to nullify the curse. The magic seemed to have worked, but her hair only partially changed to white. He decided to verify it and took her outside the barrier where she was scared at first, but soon got relieved and overjoyed about the fact that now she could live her life normally. She started crying and thanked him before they headed back inside the house. There, she handed him a blue envelope and told him that this was a letter of introduction, which would let him enter the city like a VIP. He thanked her and left the house to check out this new city and whether he could learn anything about how he could get back to his world. While near the gate, he realized that he didn't even have to get in line and entered the city without getting checked and immediately headed for the Adventurers Guild to register himself. While he was eating, the guild master approached him and took him into the back room to verify the blue envelope. He checked whether it was a fake, only to realize that the envelope was totally genuine. Then he told Shin that this envelope was extremely important, as with this he could travel through any city without checking, stay at any guild, and could even have a personal meeting with the king himself. He told him to make sure the card didn't get stolen, and he promised to keep it safe. He attacked the monster, but it blocked before striking back, while Shin jumped before backing off. He realized that this monster was stronger than he thought and seemed to have a legendary weapon. He rushed at the monster and struck again, but barely did any damage because his sword was almost broken. He knew he only had one more chance before the sword broke, so he powered up and rushed at the demon, delivering a powerful slash that deleted the monster while the sword was thrown away far into the sky. He felt bad because he wanted that sword, especially now that his sword was broken, but simply took the crystal it dropped as his reward and left the area for the time being. It turned out that the sword flew and ended up landing inside the chamber of the princess of this kingdom, who was beyond shocked to see this. While her guards wondered whether they were under attack, the princess told them to calm down and realized that the weapon was a legendary item, which was not a very usual thing to see. She told the guards to get the weapon checked and also find out who threw it inside the castle. Shin ended up returning to the city, where he found a large crowd gathered around the tattered remains of a bunch of soldiers. He asked around and found out that the soldiers were wandering the northern forest after reports of people going missing. So they went to check, but ended up getting attacked by an incredibly strong monster called Skullface that killed most of them while the rest ran away injured. The guard asked whether Shin knew anything about it, but he lied and claimed that he didn't know anything about it as he was picking herbs. After that, he returned back to the Adventurers Guild, where he met up with the receptionist named Isekaied. Even inside the guild, he found out that everyone was talking about the northern forests, as apparently a lot of monsters had been spawning there lately. He turned towards her and reported that he ended up killing the giant monster Skullface and wanted to have the gem that he dropped checked out. Isekaied was completely shocked, while Shin continued about how the monster had a giant sword which ended up going missing while his own sword ended up getting damaged during the scuffle. Isekaied got in his face, asking how he could talk so nonchalant about something so crazy, but Shin replied that he just had a chance encounter, and it was not his goal to fight the beast. Just then, a green-haired elf named Isekaied arrived who asked what the commotion was about. Isekaied went near Isekaied and whispered in her ear about how Shin ended up killing the legendary monster Skullface. Shin told them that he didn't have anything to prove that he killed Skullface though, as the items he dropped were too weak and basic, while the sword ended up getting lost. Isekaied thought that Shin must be lying about killing such a monster and asked Isekaied to get the gem checked. Isekaied told Shin to wait out here while she had the gem checked. So he turned towards Isekaied and asked whether monsters like Skullface spawned often here. She told him that monsters are born from grudges and sins of people who die a horrible death, and because a lot of people ended up dying in the northern forest, It was now filled with corpses and a perfect location for the monsters to live. She told him that usually the monsters there were pretty low level, so Skullface being there was a very big mystery. She very calmly told him that he thought so as well because he had never seen a Skullface that level 359. This utterly shocked the two girls as they wondered whether Shin was joking around or not. Celica immediately told Silica to check the level on the gem and turned around to Shin, telling him that if he was telling the truth, then that meant that he was stronger than a full party of rank adventurers. He told her to keep it a secret for now and she agreed, and after that she headed off to eat some food. While waiting for his food, a tall man wearing a weird purple dress walked in, and everyone got quiet around him, looking scared. The man came up near Shin and put his spear down, which Shin recognized as a legendary item. The man sat down the other side and introduced himself as Wilhelm Avis and asked whether he was new here. Shin replied that he came here a couple of days ago, and Wilhelm laughed about it and claimed that the only reason why Shin wasn't scared of him was because he didn't know him. He claimed that he was known as the vampire around here because his spear had the ability to suck the soul out of any enemy that tried to cross his path. Shin didn't really care about it and told him to eat quietly as he had work to do. Later that evening, he went to a library to find out more about this world and read a book, only to learn that this world was basically the same as the game he used to play, but the race of high humans had gone extinct, which meant he was the last one in this world, which could be dangerous if bad people got to know about it. Meanwhile, the guild master called a meeting where they discussed about the recent developments with Shin, as it turned out that he was telling the truth and the gem was indeed level 359. One of the royal guards asked the guild master to let him meet Shin because that morning a huge sword flew into the princess's chamber, and they believed that Shin was connected to this occurrence and the sword might belong to the monster Skullface. On the other end, Shin was sitting near a fountain, eating some snacks when he spotted a small beast girl named Millie looking at his food with hungry eyes, so he offered her a bite and she happily took it. While he was wondering whether the kid was lost, Wilhelm ended up walking up to them. As it turned out that Wilhelm took care of some of the children that lived in the church's orphanage, and this girl kept running away when she got bored. He told her to get back to the church, but before going, she went near Shin and whispered in his ear that he should save the fox in the northern forest. Shin had no idea what she was talking about, but decided to check it out the next morning. He headed over to Tiara's place, where he asked her to relay a message to Razar. He told her that he had been trying to send a mail directly, but he couldn't do it. Tiara looked confused and asked what he was talking about, so he told her that he had magic cards that he could directly send to the person he wanted. But they weren't working when he tried to send it to Razar. To demonstrate that the cards worked otherwise, he went outside the cottage and sent a mail to Tiara, which shocked her, and she asked whether she could keep some. He happily gave her the cards and told her to deliver the envelope to Razar alongside a sword that he produced. The sword supposedly belonged to Razar because in the game, he crafted it for her by using the items dropped by a lot of mythical monsters, and only she could use it. He told Tiara to convey the message to her that if she remembered the sword and who made it, she should contact him. After that, he headed off inside the forest to check what the beast girl was talking about. Suddenly, the fog thickened as he arrived near a shrouded temple. He entered inside the mysterious-looking place and peeked inside the shrine, only to see a small white fox lying in the middle of a magic circle. He walked up to her and checked the beast, only to find out that the fox had been cursed and poisoned. He immediately used his ultra-strong purifying magic to heal her, and the fox returned back to consciousness. Suddenly, he felt that something was off and checked his map to see that he was being surrounded by enemies. He went outside to find a truckload of zombified skeletons walking with swords in their hands, intent on killing him. He told the fox to stay tight while he took a spear out of his magical pocket and in just 2 extremely powerful magical strikes, ended the lives of all of the monsters. After destroying the entire group without even breaking a sweat, he checked his map once again, thinking that all was clear when he spotted that there were 2 more monsters nearby. It turned out that the statues near the gate were petrified monsters who finally broke free and attacked him. They were both level 675, which was insanely high, but he dodged their attacks and tried to use his shadowbind magic to trap them. The monsters turned out to be pretty strong and released a thick fog-like magical smoke that completely covered the entire area, blinding Shin and hurting the fox while the beasts attacked Shin from the darkness as he tried to dodge. He kept dodging their attacks while trying to think of a way out of this problem when the fox directed him towards the magical circle inside the shrine. He immediately ran inside, and to his surprise, the smoke cleared up and he was able to see clearly before they could attack. He uses his special legendary binding magic, and once they are trapped, he releases the full power of his spear, and in one devastating thrust, he completely destroys both the monsters from existence. Soon, the smoke clears up, so he checks up on the fox once again. But to his utter surprise, the fox turns out to be a level 2011 monster called Elemental Tail, which was the highest tier monster present inside the game. This was a really lucky break, as he decides to keep the fox as his pet, who could accompany him on his journey to find a way back home. He starts walking back, but realizes that considering how rare and unbelievably strong this elemental fox can be, it could become problematic as some people might attack him and try to steal her away. To make sure it doesn't happen, he decides to form a bond with the fox in the process known as taming. After a beast has been tamed, only its owner can see the stats, and this way, everyone will think that she is just a normal fox. He turns towards the fox and asks whether she would want to be tamed by him, and to his surprise, the fox seems willing to do so as she trusts him after he saved her life. He begins the process, and after a while, the fox gets successfully tamed. He names his new party member Yuzuha and heads back to the capital. He goes back to the guild, where he meets up with the receptionists Silica Lint and Celica Lint, who both want to take his report. He asks which one should he give the report to, and the sisters start bickering. He doesn't care about these things, so he walks over to the notice board, where he notices a weird quest. It seems to have been put up directly by the church and doesn't disclose anything, only asking for a skilled adventurer to approach them. He finds it very fishy, but at the same time, he is also curious about it. He decides to take the notice and head over to the church, as this way he could meet Millie as well. He reaches the church, where he meets up with a nun named Trya. She asks what he is doing here, and he honestly replies that he doesn't really know much about the church, but came here after checking the quest. The nun immediately gets interested and asks whether he is a skill holder. He tells her that he would reveal everything, but he would like to gather some information as well. He asks whether Millie, the beast girl, is around, and the nun seems suspicious but takes him back to the guest room. He waits while wondering what powers Millie possesses, as she told him to save the fox before finally, the door opens and Millie enters the room, happy to see him. She immediately runs up to him and starts hugging him, which softens the nun a little bit, as she claims that now she knows he is not a bad person because Millie usually doesn't like company. He asks whether he can start the business talk now, and the nun gives him her permission. He immediately looks at Millie and asks whether this is the fox that she was telling him to save. Millie takes a look at Yuzuha and happily claims that it is indeed the fox that she thought was in danger, and thanks him for saving her. Shin smiles and tells Yuzuha to thank Millie, as she is the one who asked him to save her life. Yuzuha immediately comes down and thanks Millie, while Shin turns towards the nun and asks about the quest. She tells him that he must be a skill holder to be able to see the quest, which makes Shin realize that even though having certain skills were very common in his world, it must be a very rare thing in this new world. She tells him that they are looking for a particular skill holder who can teach one of the church's nuns that skill. He asks whether they want the heal or the curse skill, but the nun shakes her head and claims that due to certain circumstances, they really need to learn the purify skill. She looks down, thinking that there is no way this guy knows the skill, but Shin simply replies that it is a hassle to learn that skill. She is shocked and asks whether he means that he knows the skill, and Shin replies that he does. She asks whether he would accept the quest, but he replies that he wants something in return for the job. She starts talking about gold and money, but he tells her that he is not interested in that and would like repayment in some other way. Just as the nun was going to break her vow of celibacy, Shin stops her and tells her that he simply wants to know details about the church and about the powers Millie possesses. just as the nun was going to break her vow of celibacy. Shin stops her and tells her that he simply wants to know details about the church and about the powers Millie possesses. She looks unsure about it, and it makes sense, but Shin knows way too little about this world, and having the church as his informant would be very helpful. The nun was having trouble making the decision, but Millie speaks up and tells Trya that it is fine and that she can trust Shin. Trya ends up taking the advice of the 6-year-old and tells Shin that she can give him all the information about who comes and goes from the church, alongside other details. She then tells him that Millie has the power of an oracle and can predict the future sometimes. She has never been wrong in her predictions even once, and that's why they try to keep it a secret, because some evil men can try to take her away for their own benefit. To prevent that from happening, Wilhelm Avis usually stays nearby. And because he is such a feared warrior, people stay away and don't mess with them. He then asks when she would like to learn the skill, but Trier replies that it is not her who is supposed to learn it, but the granddaughter of the previous priest because of some religious reasons. Later that day, Shin tries to mingle with the other children, but they all seem to be enchanted by the beautiful fox Yuzuha, while they completely ignore Shin and Millie. Shin doesn't know how to get closer to the kids, but Millie has had enough and wants to pet Yuzuha, so she calls her over to Shin and then takes her in her arms, cuddling and petting the pretty beast. All the children watch in amazement and jealousy, but when Shin tries to talk to them, they run away. One of the older kids walks up to him and asks whether he is the one who is going to help them. Shin replies that he did take the quest and asks for more information about it. The little girl tells him that currently, the church doesn't have a priest, so there are 2 candidates. The most promising candidate is a man who wants to destroy the orphanage completely and make his own house here. Shin asks why he would want to destroy the orphanage, and the kid replies that because they all hate this man, and he is also a money-grubbing pig. Shin asks why Trya can't become the priest, but the kid tells him that only a person with a purify skill can become a priest, and the other candidate is Rashia, the late priest's granddaughter. She pleads with him to help them, and he tells them not to worry. Later that day, he meets up with Rashia, who seems to be a nice girl but pretty clumsy and careless. He introduces himself and claims that he will teach her the purification magic, but warns her that it will totally depend on how she practices and whether she is able to complete the training. He then asks whether they know any places where high-level monsters spawn, and Trier replies that there is a very well-known spot in the faraway forest. Before he can get any further information, the door opens, and Wilhelm enters with a scowl on his face and asks why Shin took the quest. He asks what Shin asked for in return, and Shin honestly tells him about his deal with Trier. Wilhelm thinks that they are trusting him a bit too much, as he is still a no-name new adventurer, but Millie insists that Shin is fine. Wilhelm still puts his lance on Shin's throat and warns him that if any information about Millie's power gets leaked, he will kill him with his own hands. Wilhelm then asks more about the purifying skill and how to learn it. So Shin explains that you first need to have a holy gem with you, which is very hard to find. After that, you need to defeat over 200 undead monsters, and each should be at least level 150. The good thing is that only the killing blow matters, so his plan is to weaken the monsters to the brink of death so that Rashia can easily kill them off. Even Wilhelm is shocked at this because level 150 monsters are no joke. However, Shin reassures them that he can do this and insists that the harder part would have been to find a holy gem, but thanks to the power of plot armor, he already has the gem, so they can begin the process immediately. They decide to start the quest at night, and all of them go back to have some rest. While Shin was walking down to have some food, he gets ambushed by Wilhelm, who is waiting for him and takes him into a tavern for a talk. They have a deep conversation while Wilhelm explains that according to myths, every so often, a person known as the Chosen One is born, who has all the knowledge and memories from his previous life and is extremely strong. Shin wonders how this sounds similar to his reincarnation story, when suddenly he gets a message from Tierra Lucent, who claims that Rezar replied and told Shin that she wants to meet him the moment she comes back from her job. After that, Shin takes out his letter of recommendation to flex on Wilhelm, but surprisingly, even he has one. They touch tips together, which strengthens their bond even more, and a couple of hours later, head down to the dark forest. They walk for a while, after which they finally find their first wave of monsters. The dog monster attacks them, but Shin immediately freezes them in the air and tells Rashia to use her heal magic to kill them. She was unsure at first but quickly deals with them. Wilhelm takes care of the next wave of skeletons with his lance, and Rashia destroys them as well. After killing a bunch of waves, they finally head over to the deeper ends, where Wilhelm uses his adventurer's card to open a barrier which is put in place to stop new adventurers, as this area is dangerous. They enter the area, and immediately Shin notices some monsters on his minimap. Wilhelm goes ahead to deal with the ones ahead, while Shin weakens the ones nearby and lets Rashia end them. He tells her that by the time she learns to purify magic, she might become level 150 herself. Finally, Wilhelm comes back with a bunch of corpses and hands it over to Rashia, who screams in horror at this sight. Meanwhile, much deeper in the forest, the princess and her party are dealing with a giant monster. She uses her giant sword to finish the demon and realizes that without this sword, which came through her window, killing this monster would have been very difficult. She then tells one of her party members to help the other group, so she runs over to the nearby lake. The other party seems to be on their last leg, barely managing to survive against the giant monster. But the white-haired lady, revealed to be Razor, enters the fray and uses her ultra-fast strikes to slice the monster in pieces and breaks its core in half. She lands on the ground, and her hair starts flying as the knight realizes that it's the famous white-haired elf, Razor. She uses a spell called Wide Heal to immediately heal all the injuries the knights have sustained. The knight captain kneels before her and thanks her, and she says that she wouldn't have been able to defeat the monster if they hadn't weakened it. With that, Razor takes off to investigate the nearby regions for more monsters and tells the knight captain to signal her if something comes up. She does the Naruto run through the forest, and the only thing on her mind is that she can soon meet her master again. Meanwhile, Wilhelm is facing one giant skeleton monster alone and manages to bring it down with just one hit from his spear. He tells Rashia to finish the monster, and she casts the heal magic on the monster's broken core to defeat it. She suddenly starts glowing as the monster is defeated, and Shin says that it is just the special effect to tell her that she is eligible to learn a new skill. Rashia seems spaced out and Wilhelm asks if she is fine. She explains that her mind was suddenly full of information about how to use a skill. Shin congratulates her and says that now they should quickly return to the city. Suddenly, Yuzuha notices something, and as Shin looks around, his gaze also gets stuck on something. Wilhelm and Rashia also look in the direction and find dark energy from all over the forest gathering in the sky. Wilhelm says that it is the magic matter that reanimates dead creatures into monsters. The dark sphere in the sky finishes absorbing the magic matter, and then it starts changing its shape while descending to the ground. It takes the form of a giant level 8004 Skullface Lord monster. The monster suddenly leaps high into the sky and hits the barrier cast by the Adventurers Guild, shattering it along with Rashia's hope to escape the place alive. The monster lands back on the ground and looks toward Shin and his group, and they instinctively know that they should run away. The giant monster roars and summons an army of skeleton monsters to surround them. Wilhelm panics and asks Shin to help him break through the monster horde so that they can escape, but he replies that he is going to stay here. Shin removes the limiter he had placed on his power, and Wilhelm is overwhelmed on seeing his true abilities. Shin declares that he can't let the monsters roam free and cause destruction, so he will stop them here. He asks Wilhelm to head back and take Rashia and Yuzuha with him and casts a physical enhancement buff on him. Wilhelm tries to grab Yuzuha, but she tightly latches on to Shin, refusing to let go of him. He understands her feelings and lets her stay with him. He then uses a powerful lightning spell to destroy all the skeletons in front of him and opens a safe passage for Wilhelm and Rashia to run away. Shin then summons his sword and rushes towards the monsters. Yuzuha uses a blue flame attack and takes down a large number of monsters at once, but the giant monster roars and calls more monsters to its aid in response. Shin uses a powerful red thunderbeam to annihilate the skeleton monsters, and the glow of his attack is witnessed by Razor, who flies towards his location. Shin notices that his attack took down many monsters, but his minimap is filled with red dots. He sighs, hoping that Razor could come to help him, and then he would be able to fight better. Just as he wishes that, a blue dot appears on the minimap, flying towards him and clearing all the monsters on the way. Shin figures out what it means and immediately runs away from the battlefield to arrive at a field of flowers. There he finds Razor, and they look at each other dramatically with flower petals flying in the air. Shin asks her if she has been well, but then the skeleton monsters intrude on them. Yuzua jumps down and casts a barrier to give Shin some privacy, and he thanks her before turning to Razor. Before he can say anything, Razor hugs him tightly. Shin apologizes for abandoning her for so long and thanks her for watching over the shop, but she grips him tightly to suggest that she doesn't want that. Shin is confused because he hasn't mastered the art of understanding women yet, but then he realizes what Razor truly wants. He tells her that he is back home, and she cries as she welcomes him. However, their touching moment comes to an end when Yuzua runs out of energy, and her barrier disappears. The giant monster appears there, and Shin tells Razor that they should deal with it first before catching up on lost time. Both of them raise their hands and chant a spell called Sanctuary. A golden ball of light flies towards the sky and creates a radiant circle there. The light of the magic circle destroys all the monsters it touches, and Yuzua instantly gets all her lost energy back. Even the boss monster weakens after getting affected by the light, and Shin draws his sword to finish it. He jumps high and hits the monster with all his might, shattering its core. The skeleton monster falls, but before dying, it tells Shin to give his power to him. Shin is shocked to see a monster speaking, and as it disappears, he picks up its core. After dealing with the monster, Shin tells Razor that since they are already here, they should talk things out. While walking, they reach the ruins of an old building, and Shin tells her what happened on the day he went to defeat the final boss of the game and how he came here without his will. Razor also remembers that the dungeon suddenly disappeared, and so did the masters of other NPCs. She knew that Shin had cleared the game, but since she did not disappear, she believed that he was still in the game. Since that day, Razor and Shin's other NPC servants have been looking for him all over the world. Shin then suddenly asked Razor to stop calling him Master, because it would be chaotic if anyone heard a legend like her calling a seemingly normal guy her master. He asked her to call him by his name, and Razor blushed as she did that. Even Shin felt a bit weak in the knees on hearing her call his name. She then asked about his next step, and Shin said that he was going to investigate a sacred site he read about in the library. Razor asked if he planned to return home, and when Shin affirmed, she felt betrayed and sad. She knew that it was the expected answer, and accepted it without complaining. Shin changed the topic and asked how much she remembered from the game, and she replied that she remembered everything. She claimed that after he cleared the game and all the players vanished, she became more aware of herself. She and the other NPCs were partially aware during the game too, but they were not fully conscious and could not take independent actions. They watched the sunrise, and after that, they decided to return to their shop. However, before that, Razor wanted to know about Yuzua. Shin told her that Yuzua was his partner and an elemental tail, and Razor said that she knew that the fox was special just by looking at her tails, but could not guess that she was an elemental tail. Shin expressed surprise at this because he hadn't noticed anything. He lifted Yuzua up and, for the first time, noticed that she had 3 tails. If that wasn't enough of a surprise, Yuzua suddenly told him good morning, and Shin freaked out. The fox revealed that her mind cleared after the large monster yesterday disappeared. Here is the additional text with the same processing applied. Things made sense to Shin now, and he forbade Yuzua from talking in front of people, so she decided to talk to him through telepathy. Razor believed that Yuzuha's 3 tails would be a problem, but Yuzua could easily merge them into one to pretend to be a normal fox. Shin praised her, and as Yuzua basked in his praise, Razor found her unbelievably cute. Shin understood her hesitation and let her pet and cuddle with the fox, and Razor said that it was the first child elemental she was seeing because all others were adults. They decided to depart to the capital. Meanwhile, Wilhelm had been running all night while carrying Rashia on his back, and she was worried about Shin. He told her that Shin would be fine, and then suddenly, he felt something speeding towards them. He stopped and turned around to face whatever was coming towards them, only to find that it was just Shin and Razar. Rashia fainted from a panic attack, and even Wilhelm was not happy that Shin gave them a jump scare. On the other hand, the princess and her guards came across the huge hole in the ground caused by Shin's attacks. The princess thought that this hole in the ground was connected to the appearance of the magic circle in the air that destroyed all the skeleton monsters. She wondered who could have done that when one of her knights came there with the sword Shin used to cast the earth-shattering skill. The knight showed the princess a falcon symbol on the hilt of the sword and stated that a very skilled swordsmith puts this symbol on the weapons he creates. He demonstrated that despite being damaged, the sword was powerful enough to split the ground with barely any effort from his side. The knight said that he had heard that there was only one blacksmith in the world who could forge swords this powerful. Legend has it that he was a high human and was called the Peerless Black Swordsmith. The princess remarked that there were no high humans left in the world, and the knight agreed. However, all he wanted to express was that the warrior behind the incident must be someone insanely strong and rich for treating a sword made by a high human like a disposable. The princess suddenly recalled that the black blacksmith was the original owner of the shop called Moon Sanctum that Razar operates. She planned to visit the shop once they reached the capital, and the knight asked her what she planned to do if the high human was really back. The princess laughed, saying that she would like to challenge him and maybe get him to marry her. On the other hand, Wilhelm confronted Shin and asked him to reveal his secrets now. Shin tried to give Razar the credit for defeating the giant skeleton monster, but Wilhelm pointed his spear at him, asking him to stop lying. He began stabbing at Shin, saying that it was obvious that he was the strongest person here because he was spamming powerful moves earlier, and he even caught up to them so quickly. Shin could only dodge his stabs as he asked him to stop. He finally came clean and revealed that he was a high human, and also Razar's master. Wilhelm believed him easily, and then Shin asked him if there were any records about high humans in this world. Wilhelm told him that there were many records that talked about how insanely strong and skilled high humans used to be, and they were still worshipped as gods by many people. Shin said that those stories could be a problem, but he really believed that his blacksmithing skills were legendary. Soon, Rashia woke up, and as she looked at Shin, she panicked and asked if he was fine. She then noticed the white-haired elf and, upon learning that she was Razar, Rashia started fawning over her. The very next moment, she was hit by motion sickness because of being carried at super speed all night long. Wilhelm carried her on his back again while Shin apologized for it. They planned to go their separate ways once they reached the gate, and Shin gave Wilhelm some of his magical letters to contact him immediately if something happened. Wilhelm warned him that if he used these letters, he would be in a very serious situation and told Shin to rethink it. Shin realized that Wilhelm didn't want to involve outsiders in his problems, but he pushed the letters on him, remarking that he couldn't leave him alone after they had come together all this way. Wilhelm decided to take up the letters and then left for the church. Shin and Razar also headed back to their shop, where Tiara Lucent came running to greet Razar. She nervously explained to her about the man who came to their shop, claiming to be Razar's friend, without noticing that the man in question was standing right there. After Razar helped her calm down, Tiara noticed Shin, who said that they should have dinner before talking about their circumstances. Tiara asked why she should let him eat dinner with them, and then Razar decided to introduce Shin as the true owner of their shop. Tiara freaked out on hearing this, but she could not argue with Razar's judgment. She apologized to Shin for not recognizing him earlier, and he told her not to be so serious. He also introduced Yusuha to Tiara on the same note, and she was shocked to see a talking fox. Soon, Razar prepared a full-course meal for Shin, and Tiara was surprised about the ingredients because the food seemed to be covered in a faint aura. Shin said that the meat in the dishes was from strong monsters like Thermal Lion and Orc King, and even the vegetables were some rare items. Tiara once again freaked out on hearing the names of all rare and legendary class ingredients. But Shin ignored her concerns and asked Razar about the aura. She replied that the aura was the remnant of mana in the ingredients and was often seen with powerful monsters and rare plants. They began dinner with that and truly relished everything. Later, Razor told Shin that all the other NPCs were living their lives separately. They initially thought about searching for him, but then decided that he would be fine no matter where he was. So they just decided to wait patiently for him. Shin appeared a bit melancholic on hearing this, and then suddenly, the drunk Tiara started telling him that he was too serious. Razor took her to bed while Shin also headed to his bedroom that had not changed at all ever since he left it. Yuzuha had already fallen asleep, and Shin also changed into comfortable clothes to go to sleep. He felt drowsy the moment he plopped on the bed, and woke up in the middle of the night, feeling a heavy weight on his chest. As he opened his eyes and looked around, he found Razor sleeping next to him. Shin panicked on seeing her so close, and his heart started pounding uncontrollably. He gently touched her face, and Razor started crying while calling out his name. He could only wipe her tears and apologize to her in his mind. When morning came, Shin found that Razor was no longer sleeping next to him, but then he noticed some unfamiliar white hair next to him. He lifted his blanket to see what was happening and found that Yuzuha had turned into a human. As she got up lazily, Shin freaked out on seeing her bare body, and as she rushed to hug him, he feared that the FBI may come for him. He then gave her some clothes suitable for elemental tales to wear. Later, they headed to the kitchen to meet Razor and Tiara, who were surprised to see Yuzuha in her human form. She nervously greeted them, and then all of them had breakfast. After that, Shin asked Yuzuha about the shrine she was at and the symbol drawn on the floor. She didn't know anything apart from the fact that she felt less uncomfortable within the symbol as compared to any other place, and Shin began to inspect her answer for any clues. He then asked Yuzuha what she was doing there, and she replied that she was just napping in the sun when suddenly a natural disaster shook the place, and she tried her best to stop it. She got exhausted by expending all her power and then went into the shrine to rest when she thought that she was going to die. Shin came there and rescued her. Shin said that he could only save her thanks to Millie, and Yuzuha wanted to thank her with a gift. Razor suggested that they take an elven bread made by Tiara as their gift because it was the top product of their shop. Shin remarked that they were a weapon shop and not a restaurant, but Razor reminded him that he was the only one who could open the armory, so they couldn't restock it in his absence. Shin understood and decided to immediately put the shop back on track. Razor then told him that there was something more urgent than the shop, and it was about another NPC named Gerard Asteria. Shin was shocked to learn that Gerard was still alive because he was a high beast who could live only up to 150 years. Razor replied that he may not have much longer to live and was still waiting for Shin to come back. She then explained that Gerard was the one who united various beast tribes and formed the Fared Beast Alliance and became its first king. She explained that currently the alliance was ruled by the 8th king, so Gerard could wait for him. Shin confirmed that Gerard was not in any immediate danger and then decided to travel normally to meet him. Razor and Yuzuha were obviously going to come with him, and Tiara said that she would mind the shop. However, Razor told her that she didn't need to stay behind because now that Shin was here, he could carry the shop with him. The elf girl didn't understand, but Shin asked her to travel with them now that she was finally free from her curse. She gladly agreed, and Shin said that they should start preparing for their journey now. He thought about the food and equipment they needed to buy, and Razor remarked that she must report about the skullfaces to the Empire as well, so she would need to act independently for some time. Shin had no problem with that, and he planned to level up as an adventurer on the way to Fared. Razor told him to form a party with her because then they could always communicate with each other using telepathy. Shin was surprised to learn about this feature and added Razor to her party, and then suggested Tiara also register as an adventurer. Before that, Shin headed to his forge and told the excited Yuzuha not to touch anything because some weapons may be cursed. Since everything was in working condition, he made some swords, but the first sword turned out to be too good for this world. Shin knew that he couldn't sell something like this, so he decided to try less harder in the following attempt. He succeeded in making some fine swords to sell at his shop, and then Tiara came there ready to go out. They exited the forest and entered the market, which completely took Tiara by surprise as she had never seen so many people collected in one place. She asked Shin whether this place was usually this crowded, and Shin replied that the rush hours hadn't even started yet. Every single thing in the market made her curious as she hadn't been out for 100 years. At this point, she excitedly told Shin that they should go to the guild quickly and get her registered. Shin took her to the guild, where they met the receptionist, who immediately told Shin that he had been ranked up to E. Shin was confused because he hadn't even completed a single quest yet, but the receptionist replied that his exploits were well known at this point, as he defeated the giant skeleton monster before and then was spotted defeating a huge horde of skeletons. She claimed that he should be ranked up to it at once, but if they did it, it would create a lot of turmoil as the other adventurers wouldn't like it. He claimed that he didn't mind that when suddenly the receptionist's face changed as she asked who the hell was with him, as she looked at Tiara with jealous eyes. She claimed that they were seen holding hands and asked whether he was in love with her. Both Tiara and Shin got embarrassed as he claimed that there was nothing like that. He then told her that he was planning to go to the place called Faired and inquired whether there were any quests to be done on the way. The receptionist immediately took out a huge register and flipped through the pages and claimed that there was indeed one quest, which was to escort a carriage to Faired, and asked whether he would like to take it. He immediately accepted it, and they both headed out to explore the market a little bit, which basically became a date more or less as they walked through the markets looking at all the different things being sold in the area. Shin then asked her whether she wanted to check the church out, and Tiara agreed. So they headed towards the church, where they spotted Rashia involved in child labor as she cleaned the ground. She immediately ran over to Shin and greeted him warmly before asking who the girl was. Shin explained that her name was Tiara, and she worked at the Moon Sanctum, which really shocked the girl. She ran over to Tiara and asked whether she knew Razor or not. Tiara explained that Razor was her master, which made Rashia's eyes gleam with excitement as she asked her all about how Razor was as a master and a person. Sometime later, they entered the church, where Millie immediately started playing with Yuzuha and thanked him for coming here. Meanwhile, Rashia thanked him for helping her the other day, as because of that, she had been appointed as the next priest of the church, and everyone was happy. Shin asked where Wilhelm was, as he had not seen him around. They replied that Wilhelm had gone out to investigate the other priest candidate, as he suspected that there was something going on which might cause problems for the church. Shin then produced some magical charms that he created with his magic infused in it and asked them to keep it near them. Suddenly, the door opened, and the other kids entered the room, immediately swarming Shin as they all wanted to meet with him. Tiara was also not left alone as she got kids all around her and didn't even know how to deal with them. Sometime later, they exited the church as Rashia thanked them for meeting up with them and promised to protect the church as much as she could. They bid farewell and headed back to the guild, where the receptionist was ready with Tiara's adventurer's card. They took it and headed out once again as a successful day started coming to an end. He took Tiara into a dark alleyway out of eyesight and produced a beautiful crystal, claiming that they could teleport with this crystal. Tiara was beyond shocked at this and asked what he was even talking about. Shin claimed that it was just normal teleportation magic, while Tiara told him that teleportation itself was a completely lost magic that hadn't been performed in ages. He told her to get used to it as they started teleporting and immediately arrived in front of the Moon Sanctum. She was still a bit shaken up by the teleportation when Shin quickly transformed the Moon Sanctum into a portable form as a necklace, claiming that now they could take it wherever they wanted. A little while later, they headed out of the city gates and found a carriage alongside a weird alligator guy standing in front of it. It turned out that the alligator guy's name was Gayan Greg, and alongside a girl called Bakian, they had also taken the same quest to escort the carriage. Soon enough, the owner named Mac came and greeted them warmly, and soon they started traveling through the forests in silence. While traveling, they ended up making small talk as Gayan asked them whether they had killed any men before. This surprised Tiara, who looked at Shin, and he told her that usually, these escort missions had to deal with bandits who were human and not monsters. The redhead claimed that no one took her seriously because of her size and her gender, but she had beaten the crap out of a good many guys. They introduced their classes, and it turned out that Gayan was a samurai class A rank, just like Shin. While Bakian was a brawler and rank E, Shin realized that Gayan must be sufficiently strong to be rank A, and felt a little better about the mission. when suddenly, the carriage stopped. They got out to find themselves surrounded by bandits looking at them. Shin told Mac to head back inside the carriage and told Yusuya to protect him. The bandits seemed to have a lot of confidence as they started making fun of them and passing comments on the redhead, who seemed unfazed by it. Tiara was hiding behind the carriage all this while, thinking whether she could ever kill a human when she suddenly realized that Shin seemed different, as he was seething with anger at the comments passed by these men. Suddenly, she noticed a couple of other men hiding behind the trees to ambush them. Gayan told them to back off as he didn't want to kill unnecessarily. But the leader was confident and knew that he was the only a rank adventurer while the rest were rank E and lower. Shin realized that they must have some inside information, as this was not a random attack. But before the bandits attacked, an arrow went past one of them, and then another arrow flew, killing both of the hidden men. The leader was surprised that they got found, but the fight resumed. One of the guys ran at Bakyan, who simply ducked below and delivered a massive uppercut that knocked the guy out, which scared them. Gayan Greg immediately followed up as he sliced through both the guy and his sword with surprising ease. Two guys tried to attack Shin together, but he easily cut through them without any issue before walking towards the leader. The leader was still confused, as these rank E adventurers should not be this strong. But Shin immediately cut through his sword and beat the crap out of him before tying him up. He put his sword at the leader's throat and asked who the hell told him about them. When Tiara Lucent grabbed Shin from behind and put him between her massive breasts, which calmed him down a bit, and his deadly intent went away. Shin was completely surprised at this, while Tiara got embarrassed, thinking that she just did it because Shni Razar does it to calm her down. Meanwhile, Shin was looking at her confused before he decided what to do with this bandit leader. They decided to move forward and sat inside the carriage, happy that everything went according to the plan, and neither the carriage nor the owner got injured. Gayan told Shin that he was able to extract some information from the bandits, and according to him, they were appointed by some mysterious group of people who told them to capture the carriage as they wanted an item connected to the church. This all was very weird, as usually, bandits were only after money. But Gayan explained that the bandits themselves had no idea what that item was, so their plan was to simply capture the entire carriage and take it with them. Suddenly, Shin remembered how, while in the church, the sister told him that some of the senior officials of the church were very corrupt and power-hungry, and he wondered whether this was their work despite whatever the reason was.